What is happening, baby? Welcome back to this episode of the Huddle Chat Sports Network's very own fantasy football huddle, presented by Danklyfe brand, Let's Talk Sports, and our new sponsor, Shank It Golf brand. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Dallas Clark, also known as Indo is my Nindo, and we're getting hot and heavy into our fantasy football marathon that we're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks. Our goal is to come out with daily episodes and multiple episodes daily over the next 2 to 3 weeks as you prepare for your fantasy draft, because now is the most important time for you to get that fantasy football knowledge. I mean, let's face it, the odds are against you in a fantasy football league statistically. When you're looking at it, if you're just in a 10-man league, you have a 10% chance to win your league. If you're in a 12-man league, it's only 8.3% chance. The goal here by watching the Huddle Chat Sports Network and the Fantasy Football Huddle is to make yourself twice as better as the guy next to you, giving you twice the chances to win your league. So, without further ado, we're getting into today's episode. Today we're going to be talking about 6 mistakes that are common mistakes that you're going to want to avoid going into your draft preparation and your draft night. Before we get started, as always, thank you so much for everybody recently that has subscribed to the channel. And if you haven't yet, make sure you drop down to that subscriptions bar and hit that notifications bell. Once we hit 100 subscribers here on the new channel, and we're very close, so go ahead and help a brother out and help out everybody else here. And once we hit that 100 subscribers, we're going to be doing a large giveaway of tons of customized Huddle Chat Sports Show merchandise, tons of customized sports apparel, all thanks to our sponsor from Danklyfe brand. But let's get all of that out of the way and let's stop wasting time, get right into today's video. We're going to go ahead and talk about the 6 mistakes that you're going to want to avoid going into draft night and your draft preparation. But before we do, as always, if you do, now is the time to smoke them if you got them. Let's get it cracked off right. Let's get it started. And let's get right into the fantasy news, baby. So in these 6 mistakes that you're going to really try to avoid and really think about when you're going into your draft night, it's not going to be a ton of strategy. This is going to be very simple, something you can write on the front of your fantasy football draft Bible. The things that you can just remember, a little mantra you say to yourself going into the first pick of your fantasy draft. The very first rule, and the one I love to kick off every fantasy football season with, is the reminder that this is not going to be your final roster. I know there's so much goddamn excitement about the draft, and I can't blame you. I love the draft. I throw the draft party more times than not at my house because I just love the draft party. I love getting the whole league together. I love everything that comes with the draft, and the draft signifies that football is back officially. Now, when you're coming into your draft, people always think they put too much thought, too much research into their draft. Of course you want to do your research. You want to do your thoughts. You want to go into your draft not an absolute dummy. However, this is not your final roster. You're not going to win your draft, or you're not going to win your league on draft night. 40 to 60% of your roster is going to look completely different come playoff time. And we're not building our roster for week 1. We're building our roster for the playoffs. So the first rule is going to be that this is not your final roster. Remember that. Now, rule number 2, a little bit easier, is going to be do not let bye weeks affect your draft strategy. I've been a victim of this myself and being afraid of putting too many players on one bye week and overloading this bye week. And bye weeks at the end of the day is going to affect everybody. Now, if you do somehow mess around and overload your draft picks, like I did a mock draft the other day and I had a ton of players with a week 5 bye week. Now, either your team is going to look completely different and you're going to have replacements come week 5, come week 13, whatever that week is that you're having the issues with your bye. You're going to be able to either have those replacements, or let's just say you overload your week 13 bye, you chalk week 13 up as a loss, and you know that you're looking a lot stronger, you're at 90% throughout the rest of your bye weeks. If you have all your bye weeks stacked on accident in 1 week, you're going to actually kind of look better throughout the rest of your games. You're going to look at 90% while your league mate looks at about 50, 60% depending on the bye week. So we're not going to let bye weeks affect our draft strategy. Rule number 3 is going to be one that I also am a victim of myself. Drafting too many suspended or too many injured players without having the IR spot or the roster space to do so. What you're doing by taking somebody that may not be available in those first few weeks, by taking a Kyler Murray, if you don't have the roster built to take a Kyler Murray, you're taking yourself out of the ability to get more waiver options. You can get Kyler Murray. You can get some of these players that are not coming back until week 6. If you're looking at Jameson Williams from the Lions, who's suspended until week 6, if you're drafting Jameson Williams, you're locking a roster spot out of waiver contention. You're taking yourself and putting a player on your bench saying, for the first 6 weeks of the season, I can't use him, and I don't want to drop him because I don't want my league mates to pick him up either. So stop drafting overly and too many times, drafting those injured players, drafting those suspended players without having the roster ability, the roster space, or even the IR spot to do so. Be aware of drafting those players. It's different when you're looking at an Alvin Kamara who's suspended for the first 3 games, who may be able to affect your team a lot quicker. But I remember looking at DeAndre Hopkins last season, not coming back until after a 6-game suspension, and he was getting drafted in 73% of leagues. We got to stop doing that. You're locking yourself out of a potential league-winning player that you can find on the waiver wire later on. Rule number 4 is going to be, do not lock yourself in to one specific strategy. You really want to be able to go wherever the wind takes you. You want to be able to be comfortable with a multitude of strategies. You might want to come into the draft with a hero RB strategy or a zero RB strategy, and everybody in the league is going with the same idea as you, and you have the 10th pick in the draft. When you look at that and say, man, I might have to take a change with my draft strategy and be comfortable moving and not getting myself locked in and be able to follow the trend and let it come to you. You're going to be flexible in fantasy football. Fantasy football is just like an NFL season. It's subject to an absolute multitude of randomness and craziness. So you got to be flexible. You got to be able to pivot and change your strategy at any given time. Now, with that being said, moving on to rule number 5, when you're doing that, you want to use more than one resource when you're doing your research. A lot of times, if you look even just simply at the difference between ESPN Fantasy Football, Yahoo Fantasy Football, NFL Fantasy Football, and you look at the overall ADPs, they're gonna look a lot different from platform to platform, from strategy to strategy, from league to league, whether you're PPR, non-PPR, whatever it is that you're doing. You're gonna not want to be. You don't want to just listen to one analyst or look at one set of rankings. You want to get your research from multiple different standpoints, because you may not be seeing a trend that's happening because your app hasn't updated itself yet. Moving on to the last rule that you want to think about, the last mistake that you want to avoid going into draft night, going into your draft research, is we got to stop wasting late round picks on low upside players. Picking players that aren't going to be great, but are going to be just good enough to not want to drop them off your roster. At the end of the day, in those last rounds, in those really important, crucial last rounds of your fantasy football draft, you want to be buying lotto tickets. You want to be swinging for the fences. You want to do everything you can picking those upside players, taking a chance on those players that are either going to make your team that much better, and you're going to be able to plug them in and see something that everybody else was kind of sleeping on, or you're going to be able to drop them and pick up something more valuable off the waiver wire in a trade, whatever it may be. But you got to stop taking those Zay Jones, Michael Gallup type players and saying they showed some flashes last year, and if they get a little more volume, I get looking at those players and wanting that consistency on your bench. But at the end of the day, you're never going to want to start them. And so you're never going to want to drop them at the same time because they're playing just good enough that you don't want somebody else to get them. And then they finally have that flash week. Stop all that noise. Get somebody with extremely high upside in those late rounds. Somebody that's going to make your team, or you can take them and kick them to the curb. Those are going to be the 6 biggest mistakes that you're going to avoid going into your draft preparation and your draft night. Thank y'all so much for tuning into this installment of the Fantasy Football Huddle. We got draft strategies coming around the corner. We got breakout players, sleepers, players to avoid, a multitude of different types of videos coming out. This is just the tip of the iceberg of our fantasy football marathon. Thank y'all so much. And as always, keep your chin up and your attitude down. I'll see y'all next time. I'm out of here, baby.
Bye.